can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. It's me, Niall. Delighted as always to be joined by Owen, and we're here in further reaction mode from what we saw last night from Wembley Stadium in London as Alexander Usyk defeated Daniel Dubois by stoppage in round 5 of their rematch. Usyk taking Dubois' IBF title to become a two-time undisputed heavyweight champion. And yeah, today, as you can see by the title of the video, we're going to be discussing what might be next for Daniel Dubois. You know, we've seen him lose to Usyk once and go on and become world champion. So, yeah, we're gonna be chatting about whether he can do it again. You know, can he go again and build on that momentum that he had after the first Usyk loss? So, yeah, Owen, I hope you're well as always. Let's jump straight into it. You know, as I said, Dubois, no shame in losing to Usyk. He lost once before, you know, and it was kind of the best thing that ever happened to him, to be honest with you, in a weird way. You know, the run he went on after to become a world champion. Yeah, let's get straight to the big question first. Do you think that Daniel Dubois will become a world champion again?
Um, yeah, I do think he can come again. He's still so young in the landscape. I think as almost demoralising as the Joe Joyce loss was, obviously, broken eye socket. Nothing you can do about that. I think it was almost a good thing for him because of how young he was, stepping up into a huge domestic clash. The Joshua win was huge. Um, some people will argue he beat Usyk the first time. I don't think he did. I thought it was a low blow. And he dared to be great again and lost and got stopped by one of the current best in the world and one of the best ever. So I think he definitely can. When you look at the heavyweight landscape, obviously Usyk's, yeah, he said he's only just getting started, so he could be around for a long while to come. But when you look at the likes of Usyk, Fury, AJ, even still like your Wilders hanging around, when it comes down to it, when you've got your Dubois, Italmas, Cabials, Hergovic will probably still be around. I think when we lose this current crop, the younger generation coming through, I don't think it's going to match what we've got at the moment. There could be some superstars out there that come in and put their name and put their claims down. But yeah, I think Daniel Dubois can definitely come again and become a world champion. Just unfortunately not whilst Alexander Usyk's around.
Yeah, I do agree. You know, I agree with what you said there. You know, I said on the reaction video last night to the fight that in terms of the loss, you know, there's absolutely nothing to worry about for Daniel Dubois after that loss. You know, I hope it doesn't kind of affect him. You know, he did get stopped more emphatically than he did the first time, but you know, he still has so much more going so much more going for him. You know, he's only 27, which is very young in the heavyweight division, especially. So he's got loads of time. He lost. It's not like he lost to a scrub. You know, he has two losses on his record now to one of the best to ever do it. And yeah, as I say, you know, he just that first loss was kind of the best thing that ever happened to him. You know, the confidence of people thinking, oh, he could have won. I agree though, it was a low blow. You know, I don't think you can. You know, that's not really up for much of a debate in my opinion. But he took so much confidence from that and the kind of talking to that Usyk gave him after the fight, and he went on such a run about, you know, beating Hergovic, beating Miller, and then beating Joshua. You know, he does have his limitations. You know, he can be a little bit stiff at times. You know, he's not the best boxer, but you know, full of confidence. You know,
Mm.
bullishly strong and massively heavy-handed. So it can take you a long, long way in a division that's not amazing outside the likes of a Alexander Usyk and a Tyson Fury. I do think he will become world champion again, as you say, not while Usyk is there. There's no shame in that, but I think into 2026, I think the important thing to know is that those belts are going to become fragmented. Usyk doesn't have long left. Those belts are going to become broken up. And I think Daniel Dubois is one of the best still in the world that can pick up a vacant belt, or a belt against a kind of a lesser opponent. So yeah, I do think as well with you that Daniel Dubois can and will become a world champion again. So yeah, that just gets us on to, before we kind of wrap up, I'm curious to get your thoughts as to what are the next logical kind of steps and fights in your opinion for Daniel Dubois. There is interesting options. I know he's been stopped quite badly, but who are some sort of names that you'd like to see Dubois in with next as he rebuilds towards a world title shot?
I think the problem for Daniel Dubois now is he's put himself in a position where it's big fights only. No one would begrudge him if he took on just almost like a warm up fight next, just to get back in the swing of things, stop someone. That's essentially just going to be getting a payday. You've just been stopped by the best on the planet currently, and one of the best we've ever seen in the sport. So no one would begrudge him if he took like an 8-rounder just to get back on the horse again. But you look at, obviously, following the Joyce fight, now you look at who he's fought, Hrgovic, Joshua, Usyk twice, big fights only. So unfortunately, he can really only have that one sort of, it sounds weird to say acceptable, but the public wants to see the big fights, and Daniel Dubois has put himself in the limelight of big fights now. So in terms of names, obviously Parker's going to be fighting Usyk next, it appears. Maybe a Kabial. I think that'd be a really good fight. Be really interesting because you'd have Kabial who'd be looking to go to the body, and Dubois who'd be looking to just take his head clean off. So I think stylistically that makes a good fight. And when you think of who's around, who's ranked, names, etc., is Wilder what he once was? Absolutely not. No one's bothered about Dillian White anymore. Moses Italma's going to crucify him. I can't see Uncle Frank allowing Italma and Dubois to meet unless it's for all the marbles and world titles at the right stage. So when you look at the heavyweight rankings, I don't know about yourself, but I really like the Kabial fight. Kabial got his Riyadh season sort of break. He's been sort of around with not many people necessarily outside of your hardcore fans knowing who he is. Now, obviously, with that Zhang fight, people know who he is. The way he won that fight as well. So, if he could get from his perspective, if he gets a win over Daniel Dubois, then his stake for a world title is skyrocketed. So I think that's the one for me next. Well, if he wants to have a tune-up, let him have a tune-up, but the next proper fight.
That's Kabiel is a great show, to be honest with you. I think to get Daniel Dubois back in a big fight. But as you said, nobody begrudged him a soft touch. That run has been crazy. Usyk, Miller, Hrgovic, Joshua, Usyk again is insane, to be honest with you. So yeah, he definitely wouldn't begrudge him a softer kind of 8-rounder or so. But yeah, Kabiel is a great show. I think, to be honest with you, Kabiel beats Dubois. I think the best versions of each beat. Kabiel comes out on top. No shame in that for Dubois. I just think Kabiel is too quick, too clever. His feet are too good. And yeah, I'd love to see it though. I really would love to see it. It'll be an outstanding fight. Uh, a name I want to throw at you kind of before we wrap up. Caviel seems to have a homecoming soon in the next couple of months or so, September, October time. Probably won't be against Daniel Dubois especially after how emphatic that loss was last night. A name that kind of doesn't seem to be kind of have a next fight lined up. Martin Bacoli. How would you see a Martin Bacoli Daniel Dubois fight playing out? Of course, Bacoli on an impressive run well before the Parker fight, bounced back with the Ajagba performance, which wasn't great, but gets it he gets it done. How would you see that going? Bacoli at his best against Daniel Dubois.
If it's the sparring undisputed Hall of Famer, number one of all time, GOAT champion, then it's Martin Bacoli. But if it's the Martin Bacoli we've seen recently, I think Dubois would stop him. He was the boogeyman, as you say. He was the talked about name, and all of a sudden, like before, if this video was filmed, say 12 months ago, what next? You know, Piccoli would be one of the names that probably sprung to mind first. But I think with the lackluster Jagba fight, which was, I don't know about the scorecards on that one. Again, that's another video. You know, the Parker payday. You know, it was made out he was saving the show, he was saving the day, and he was, you know, fair play to him. No one can begrudge him for filling his pockets, but let's be honest, the shape he come in. I know Billy Nelson has said they need to get him a nutritionist, but Billy Nelson himself knew what shape Piccoli was in. Martin Piccoli knew he was going into that fight with no way of winning that fight. Let's be honest. He was there to finally get himself in the limelight, and what a way to do it. Mental, but I just think that stylistically, I think Piccoli's a bit of a plodder. Dubois has a plodding style, but with a lot more speed, a lot more menace as well. Like you say that we've said, like how bullish he is, the strength, how strong he is, you know, how physically fit he is as well. So he's got that plodding style with better attributes on top of it. So I think when you put them together, I think it's almost a whoever lands first type of thing. And I think Dubois lands first, and I think Dubois would stop him.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. You know, first of all, if it's a conversation that we're having a year ago, it's probably a different answer. But you know, the last two fights, the Parker fight, you can't even really count as a, you know, it's just it was such a weird situation that. But then against a Jagba, totally underwhelming. As you said, if we went by sparring stories, Piccoli is the greatest heavyweight that's ever lived. To be honest with you, so it's a shame we can't see that more often. You know, he clearly is talented. You know, he's bullishly strong. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's freakishly strong. We've seen it against Jared Anderson and others. You know, when he is on form, he is a nightmare for anybody. But Cowley clearly has problems in terms of his fitness. You know, his conditioning is an issue. Maybe he's a bit too heavy for his own good. But yeah, I think you're only as good as your last performance, and that Piccoli performance, I still think Dubois will be a bit too a bit too explosive, as you said, and a bit too powerful, and a bit more disciplined than Martin Piccoli. But I think, you know, in terms of Piccoli not having a name lined up at the minute since the Ajagba fight, you know, if you give Dubois a bit of time to recover, I think that'll be a good fight for both to return to the ring, in my opinion. But yeah, Cabiel would also be a fascinating option. There is a lot of interesting options, and I agree with you. I think he'd be a world champion again when Usyk retires. You know, I think he'll have to wait a bit, but I think he will get his hands on a belt. So yeah, that was myself and Owen with a fun little discussion there about Daniel Dubois following on from a stoppage defeat to Alexander Usyk last night. Can he regain a heavyweight title? You know, former IBF champion now. Can he dust himself off like he did the first time he lost to Usyk in Poland? Get back on the horse and yeah, become world champion again. Let us know what you think in the comments. Get involved down below. Do you think the world win a world title again? And how does he get on against the names that we mentioned and the other names in the division? So yeah, get involved in the comment section. And as always, don't forget, first of all, drop a like on the video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not doing so already. And follow us on all social media. Owen, it was a pleasure and take care.
Pleasure as always, mate.